Hello and welcome to Lesson 6. Today we are going to talk about three related concepts: tables, variables, and equations. So, let's get started by talking about tables. You are probably already familiar with what a table is, so I'm not going into too much detail about this. However, in math modeling, it is important to remember that tables are really good for displaying raw data. However, you should only use it for data that is hard to visualize, mostly data that falls in different categories so that you cannot really put it onto a graph, because graphs are definitely a more visual and easier way for people to view data. And as we said in the previous video, we need captions. And for tables, the caption will occur on the top of the table. And also, importantly, in math modeling, all tables should follow the scientific three-line table format, which we will cover right now. Now, let's talk about the three-line table format. So, in a scientific table, we always show different entries to the table in rows, and we show the different variables or categories in columns. And in this table, we only use three horizontal lines. One line at the top, one line on the bottom. These two lines are generally a bit thicker. And there's one more line that will fall between the heading and the body. So, let's look at an example. And this is a table. So we have a caption right on the top, Table 1, occupation and monthly pay of 5 surveyed individuals. And then you see this table only have three horizontal lines, and we can see that the first three things that fall between the two lines is our categories: name, occupation, and monthly pay. And then we put the 5 entries in rows. And also we can see that tables are good for both categorical variables such as occupation and numerical variables such as monthly pay. Now that we understand about tables, let's look at variables. So, you should define variables for everything you need to use in your equations. Typically, in math modeling, you can use Latin or Greek letters for variables, but please do not use any other type of letters. Latin and Greek is enough. And you should avoid using letters that have a widely accepted meaning. For example, pi, which is commonly used for the ratio between the circumference and the diameter. E, which is commonly used for Euler's number. I, which is commonly thought of as the imaginary constant. Or D, which is often the symbol for derivative. And if you have variables of the same type, you can use subscripts. For example, when we want to talk about velocity, we can use v with subscript I for initial velocity, and v with subscript f for final velocity. And the clearest way to define all your variables is through a table. Of course, it would be a three-line table format table, and you should have 3 columns. The first column with all the symbols, the second column with the definition of the variable, and the final column showing the unit of the variable. And if you want, and if you have a lot of subscripts, you can use a separate table to define your subscripts. This time you probably only need 2 columns. So, now let's look at equations. Equations are a big part of your paper, and you use it to express the mathematical relationship between variables. One really important thing about it is that you must use mathematical notation and you must format your math properly. And for equations, you should also label them, but the label is really simple and it's just a number in parentheses. And one common mistake people make is that people call these mathematical relationships formulas. However, in scientific literature, it's called equations, not formulas. So in your solution paper, remember to use the word equations. Now, let's look at an example. So, here are two versions of the same equation. It's essentially area equals to half times pi times radius squared. And here I put a label in parentheses with a number in it at the end. So, let's look at the first equation. It is good because we format it mathematically. Fractions are shown as it should be. Multiplication is shown with a dot, and exponentation is shown with a superscript. This is a good equation. However, let's look at the bottom. Well, the fraction is not formatted properly, and it's only separated by a slash, and the asterisk is used instead of the multiplication sign, and the caret is used instead of the proper exponent. And this is not a proper equation, so be sure to use mathematical notation. And that's the lecture for today. We covered 3 topics really quickly. Thank you very much.